Hello everyone, just another off-the-cuff video today on the announcement of a new Pope. Now before I begin, I think it's important to note what many Catholics have actually said, which is while people may disagree politically with a religious figure, you have to remember they represent something bigger, something more transcendent. I think that's a fair point, especially in materialist modernity. However, it's not the point I'm going to focus on in this video. I do believe that as much as we can respect one's spiritual value and their understanding of the transcendent and how that can speak to today's world, in my mind, Europe is on the brink. It's on the edge. And it is one of the most challenging times for us. I speak about it a lot on this channel. The Europeans may lose control of Europe itself. Maybe we already have. And a progressive pope who's going to be pro-open borders and the like doesn't seem like that's exactly what we need right now. Now, I think this probably explains why I, and I'm sure many others out there, are somewhat wary of the Catholic Church. And don't get me wrong, I think the Catholic tradition is truly amazing. It's truly beautiful. Maybe the finest of all of the global religions. But it's things like this that I think are putting off lots of young Western men and why they veer more towards perhaps orthodoxy, a different form of Protestantism, their own spiritual practice, or maybe even like me, they're more drawn to mysticism. They know they're not going to be told to worship immigrants and attend pride parades if they go down that direction. You may think I'm being a bit OTT, and maybe I am for slight comedic effect, but we must remember what's happened to the Anglican Church, which is a complete joke now. And I do worry that the Catholic Church may be going down the same road. It also deserves to be said that many of the critics of the Catholic Church and Christianity, especially from the right, do have a very solid point. Now, I think they're half right. I've disagreed with many of them in their takes before, but you can't argue that in its present iteration, Christianity, as exemplified by Anglicanism and the Catholic Church on the whole, is increasingly liberal. And I've explored that at great depth on this channel. The idea that the prevailing ideology of a time guts out all of the institutions, the traditional institutions of the past, and reinflates them with its own ideology. Now, we've seen that in every arena in the modern world, whether it's education, whether it's the arts, and religion is no different. It's perhaps more painful when it comes to religion because you think that's the one thing that's supposed to stand up for eternal values. It's supposed to be the very bedrock of tradition, but it's not always the case. Now, I've said before, I think many people have a very solid point when they say Christianity is the precursor to the present liberal society we have. Some people say the universalism in terms of how Christians see universal value across all people and all groups means that allows, if you like, the excesses of liberalism to deconstruct the West. Now that's, of course, a solid point. However, I have disagreed with that view of Christianity as a whole. I think I've made it very clear on this channel, I believe. That's one side of Christianity that's been massively overinflated because, again, of the dominant liberal powers of the era. So when, the modern Christians, progressive ones, talk about challenging the establishment, very often they just are the establishment. And what they're talking to is the more feminine energy, which is dominating the modern Western world. I've often pointed to the fact that if you go back pre-Industrial Revolution, pre the dawn of modernity, the Christian Church didn't have these problems. These weren't issues. We were more than happy to engage in crusades to defend the Holy Land. Europe was largely unified under the Christian banner, Christendom, if you will. It's really the advent of modernity which has led to this corruption in Christianity. Of course, I've spoken a great deal too about the masculine and feminine and energies of life. Right now we have the feminine energy, and that's how we understand Christianity. Christ is seen as sort of a hippie figure who accepts everything, just loving and kind, no boundaries, no borders. Everything's okay, everything's cool, man. As if he's some hippie stoner who stumbled upon a pride parade and is clapping along. That isn't really Christ if you read the Gospels. By all means, Christ is totally loving. He really is. He's totally compassionate. But he's also very much about boundaries. He's come to bring a sword, he says. He throws the moneylenders out of the temple. He also has a side of discipline, borders and boundaries, and it's that which we completely play down, and of course it's that which is ruining us in the modern era. On top of that, I don't think we really understand the true depth of the Christian message. I've spoken before about how the modern world often misreads the Christian line on equality as a physical thing. That's not my reading at all. I think what that's talking to is the oneness of the Spirit. We're all in God because God is life. Being itself is God, and we all exist within that realm. But that doesn't mean there aren't differences between us. There are differences between men and women. There are differences between different groups around the world. It doesn't mean we need mass immigration and liberal ideology. I would say that's a bastardization of the Christian teaching. But again, these points, unfortunately, aren't really being made in the mainstream at all. And if they were, you would be called evil and a racist anyway. At the moment, it seems that we're in quite a lot of trouble. The church, again, is in the hands of another progressive who's going to promote and push a lot of the wokeness that people are going to Christianity to try and escape. We're seeing this across the Western world. Lots of young men looking for meaning, trying to find their roots in what is an increasingly strange, chaotic and corrosive modern world. And it's extremely sad that increasingly they are going to churches and effectively just having the Guardian read out to them with biblical language. It's not what they're looking for, and I don't think it's going to give our young men what they need either. Now again, I say all of this because probably the core crux behind this channel, one of the main things that got me to start it, was this basic question. I'm not particularly far right. I don't hate any other people of any other groups out there. I try not to have any animosity towards anybody, but it's always struck me as odd that people seem to be just blindly walking into a world where Europeans are going to be a minority in Europe. That to me seems heartbreakingly sad. And again, it's not because I hate other groups, it's because this is our home. Our ancestors created this place and gave it to us. They gave us our tradition. It seems to me we're busy throwing it away. Now again, I believe all peoples around the world have a right to their historic traditions, their historic cultures. And what's being taken from us under the guise of equality and diversity is just, I think, awful. I think it's terrible. I think it's morally indefensible. And I've explored again in great detail how the leftist liberal ideology, the bastardization of Christianity, is being used by money power to effectively blackmail us, emotionally blackmail us into accepting our own replacement. I know even that language isn't allowed in this day and age, but what else can we call it? Some of the estimations that by 2060, 2070, 2080, the majority of Western nations will be European minority. And we're just supposed to think nothing's going to change. It's going to be all the same. I think there's that meme goes around progressive Twitter, which is, oh my God, there's going to be more spice on our food. How scary. They really think that that's all that's going to happen. Unfortunately for me, it's really going to be a tragedy for the European people. But secondly, when we accept this mass migration, open borders mentality, which it looks like the new Pope probably will, we don't just undermine Europe. We don't just undermine the Europeans. Ironically, we undermine the church as well. I mean, what do they think is going to happen if we let in all these people from the third world, many of whom are Muslims, many of whom have different religions too? And many of whom too are coming here purely for the money, not the respect of European culture, even if they are Christian. So my point is that I think that we are in a bad way. But, as I say many times over, perhaps all this stuff needs to happen. Things need to get bad so people feel the sting, then all the untruth is removed, and we can get back to the heart of what we are. And that might be rocky getting there, but we will have to eventually come back to ground zero and rebuild. And as I say, sometimes things need to get rocky for us to be able to do that. But, when we look around present Europe, the present West, and we see the state of our governments, our major institutions, our churches, it increasingly does seem like we are on our own and we're going to have to rebuild from the bottom up. I don't say that with glee. I would love the great elders of the church, of government, of culture to come forward and lead us and reawaken our great history. But they're not. They're not. They're brainwashed into this liberal cult and they're obsessed with money on the one side and seemingly morally virtuous on the other. And that is going to lead to our collapse. But as I say, it's in that collapse I think we probably will find ourselves again. And even though it may seem like we're alone, when we truly discover the real tradition, the real living God, we are never alone. And the more of us that recognise that and stand together in strength, in peace, in knowledge, in wisdom, in health, the better we'll be down the line. Of course, this is why I started the new channel, The Sacred Way. Do check that out down below if you're interested. It's all about personal and spiritual transformation. You can join me on the Substack if you want to join an upcoming call I'm holding as well. And other than that, you get exclusive content. But do subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts as well. Enjoy the rest of your day.